Clint Eastwood saw restaurant staff dragging out a homeless man in a torn military jacket. When Clint realized what the jacket meant, he did something that left 40 diners in stunned silence. It was a quiet Tuesday evening in October 2011 at Osteria Mozza in Los Angeles. The upscale Italian restaurant was Clint's favorite spot when he wanted to escape the Hollywood circus. He came here for the exceptional food, the discreet staff, and the corner table by the window that gave him a view of the street without being visible to most diners. Clint was at his usual corner table, reading a script between bites of pasta, when the commotion started near the entrance. 2 staff members were escorting someone out. The man wasn't being aggressive, just confused, disoriented, trying to understand why hands were pulling him toward the door. Most diners glanced up briefly, registered that an inappropriate person was being removed, and returned to their meals. But Clint kept watching. The man was probably in his mid-60s, though it was hard to tell through the weathered destruction that homelessness carves into faces. His hair was matted, his clothes torn and stained. But what made Clint put down his fork was the jacket. Underneath the dirt, the jacket was military issue. On the back, barely visible through the grime, U.S. Marines, Vietnam. His name was Robert Chen, 67 years old, homeless for 6 years. He'd been a Marine sergeant, 2 tours in Vietnam, then 30 years as a machinist. But PTSD, factory closure, divorce, and bad decisions had led him to the streets, living under the 405 freeway with other forgotten veterans. Tonight, medication-induced confusion had carried Robert not just to the window, but through the door. He'd stood outside hundreds of times, watching people eat, remembering he'd once been normal too. But tonight his feet brought him inside, and suddenly he was in the middle of the restaurant, staring at white tablecloths and wine glasses. The manager had immediately signaled for removal. "Sir, you need to leave," Vincent, the manager, said firmly. "This is a private establishment." Robert looked confused. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Please leave now or we'll call the police." When Robert didn't move, 2 staff members took his arms and started walking him out. That's when Clint Eastwood stood up. "Wait," Clint's voice cut through the restaurant noise. The entire dining room went quiet. People recognized that voice before they even turned to see who had spoken. When they saw Clint Eastwood standing at his table, every conversation stopped. Vincent, the manager, froze. The 2 staff members holding Robert's arms froze. Robert himself seemed too confused to react. Clint walked toward them with that distinctive, purposeful stride. "Let him go," Clint said quietly. Vincent's face went pale. "Mr. Eastwood, I apologize for the disturbance." "I said let him go." The staff released Robert immediately. Clint stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the torn military jacket. "Are you a Marine?" he asked Robert directly. Robert looked at Clint with confusion, slowly giving way to recognition. Yes, I was. Sergeant Robert Chen, 1st Marine Division." "Vietnam?" "2 tours, 68 and 70. Clint was quiet for a moment, his weathered face unreadable. Then he turned to Vincent. "This man is a United States Marine. He served 2 tours in Vietnam while most of us were safe at home. And you were about to throw him out like garbage?" Vincent opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Eastwood, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't ask," Clint interrupted. "You saw someone homeless and decided he didn't belong here. You know what that jacket means? It means he earned the right to stand anywhere in this country he wants to stand." The restaurant was dead silent. 40 diners sat frozen, forks halfway to mouths, wine glasses suspended in air. Clint turned to Robert. "Have you eaten today?" Robert shook his head slowly. "No, sir." "Then you're eating now," Clint said. "With me." He gestured toward his corner table. Robert stared, not comprehending. "Come on," Clint said more gently. "I've got a table by the window. Good view. You can tell me about Vietnam." I can't," Robert stammered. I don't belong." "You're a Marine who served his country," Clint said. "You belong wherever you damn well choose to be. Now come sit down before your pasta gets cold." He gestured toward his corner table. Robert stared at him, not comprehending. "Come on," Clint said more gently. "I've got a table by the window. Good view. You can tell me about Vietnam." I can't," Robert stammered. I I don't belong. You're a Marine who served his country, Clint said. You belong wherever you damn well choose to be. Now come sit down before your pasta gets cold. The walk from the entrance to Clint's corner table was perhaps 30 feet, but in those 30 feet, Robert Chen, homeless Marine veteran, walked past 40 of Los Angeles' most successful people, past tables where single meals cost more than he'd spent on food in a month, past shocked faces and open mouths and the kind of stunned silence that only comes when everyone present realizes they're witnessing something extraordinary. Clint pulled out a chair for Robert, waited until he sat down, then took his own seat across from him. "Vincent," Clint called to the manager, who was still standing frozen by the entrance, "we need another menu, another place setting, and whatever the kitchen recommends tonight. And Vincent, the next time a veteran walks through that door, you treat them like they own the place, because in a very real sense, they do." "Yes, Mr. Eastwood," Vincent managed to say. "Of course." What happened over the next 2 hours would become legendary among the Osteria Mozza staff. Clint didn't just share a table with Robert, he talked with him, really talked. Not the way you talk to someone you're doing charity for, but the way you talk to someone whose story you actually want to hear. Robert, after the initial shock wore off, began to speak about growing up in San Francisco, son of Chinese immigrants, about joining the Marines at 19 because he wanted to prove he was American, wanted to belong. About Vietnam, not the dramatic combat stories, but the small moments, the heat, the fear, the friends who didn't come home. Clint listened without interrupting. He didn't try to relate or compare. He just listened the way you listen when someone is telling you something important. "After I came back," Robert said, picking at his pasta carbonara with trembling hands, "I couldn't figure out how to be normal again. Everyone else just went on with their lives like nothing had happened. I got a job, got married, had kids, but I was always angry, always drinking." "PTSD?" Clint asked. "They didn't call it that back then," Robert said. "Just told me to toughen up, move on, so I tried. For 30 years I tried. Then the factory closed. My wife left. My kids stopped talking to me. One day I realized I didn't have anywhere to go home to." Clint was quiet for a moment. "You have kids?" Robert's face clouded. "2. Son and daughter. Haven't seen them in 6 years. They think I'm dead. Maybe better that way." "That's not better," Clint said firmly. "It's never better." Around them, the restaurant had returned to normal activity. People were eating again, talking again, but quietly. Every diner kept glancing at the corner table where Clint Eastwood and a homeless Marine were sharing a meal. When they finished eating, Clint signaled for Vincent. "I need the check." "Mr. Eastwood," Vincent said nervously, "your meal is complimentary, of course." "That's not what I asked for," Clint said. "I need the check, and I need a pen." Vincent brought both. The check for 2 pasta dishes, 2 salads, and wine came to $240. Clint looked at it, then looked at Robert. "Robert," Clint said, "I'm going to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. If I could change one thing about your situation right now, just one thing, what would it be?" Robert thought for a long moment. "I'd want to see my kids again, just once, just to tell them I'm sorry, that I know I failed them." Clint nodded and pulled out his phone. "David," he said into the phone, "I need you to do something for me tonight. I need you to find Robert Chen's children, son and daughter, probably mid-30s, somewhere in California, because I'm asking you to. Thank you." He hung up and looked at Robert. "David Webb is my producer. He's good at finding people. Give me your kids' names." Robert, tears streaming down his face, whispered, "Michael and Sarah Chen." Clint texted the names, then turned back to the check. He wrote something on it, signed it, and handed it to Vincent. Vincent's hands started shaking. On the signature line, Clint had written $5,000, and Vincent, starting tomorrow, Robert Chen eats here free anytime he wants for the rest of his life. Put it on my tab. And the same goes for any other veteran who walks through that door. On the bottom of the check, the next time you see a homeless person in a military jacket, remember that they stood between you and war. They earned the right to stand anywhere. Clint Eastwood. Vincent looked up with tears in his eyes. "Mr. Eastwood, I'm so sorry. You didn't see him," Clint said. "Start seeing them." What happened after that night is the part most people never heard. David Webb found Michael and Sarah Chen within 36 hours. Both lived in Southern California. Neither had heard from their father in 6 years. Both thought he was probably dead. When David called and explained that Clint Eastwood had met their father at a restaurant and that their father wanted to see them, they thought it was a scam. It took considerable convincing and multiple verifications before they agreed to meet. The reunion happened at a Santa Monica park, arranged by Clint, who didn't attend but ensured everything was set up properly. Michael and Sarah arrived skeptical, defensive, prepared for disappointment. They found their father sitting on a bench, cleaned up, wearing new clothes Clint had arranged. When Robert saw his children for the first time in 6 years, he broke down completely. The reunion wasn't easy. There were years of pain to work through, but it was a beginning. Clint quietly arranged for Robert to enter comprehensive VA treatment, covering costs the system wouldn't handle. He set up a trust fund for housing after treatment. He ensured Robert got the mental health care he'd needed for 40 years but never received. Robert moved into a studio apartment 6 months later. His relationship with his children healed slowly. He volunteered at a veterans center, helping other homeless vets navigate the system that had failed him. Most importantly, Robert ate at Osteria Mozza every Thursday, sometimes alone, sometimes with veterans from the tent city he'd left behind, sometimes with his son or daughter. Vincent and staff learned every veteran's name, their service history, their favorite dishes. The restaurant became known in the veteran community as a place where you were welcome regardless of circumstances, where military service meant something, where nobody got thrown out for looking wrong. The restaurant became known in the veteran community as a place where you were welcome regardless of your circumstances, where military service meant something, where nobody got thrown out for looking wrong. Clint never publicized what he'd done. The story became known only because Robert told it, to explain to other veterans that sometimes someone sees you. 2 years later, Robert spoke at a veterans event. "I was invisible for 6 years. Thousands passed me daily. I was just a problem to be removed, an uncomfortable reality to be ignored. Then, one person looked at my jacket and saw past the dirt and the smell and the failure. He saw the Marine I used to be, and that changed everything." In 2014, Clint established a program with the LAVA to identify homeless veterans and connect them with comprehensive services. Funded entirely by his own money, it's helped over 800 veterans find housing, treatment, and family reconnection. At the program's headquarters, there's a small plaque that reads, "See the person, not the problem. See the service, not the circumstances." Robert Chen, now 72, still eats at Osteria Mozza every Thursday. 8 years sober, reunited with both his children and 3 grandchildren he never knew existed. Working part-time at the Veteran Services Program, talking to homeless vets who remind him of who he used to be. Every anniversary of that October night, Robert sits at the same corner table where Clint sat with him, orders pasta carbonara, and thanks a waiter for seeing him. The story of Clint Eastwood and Robert Chen reminds us that visibility isn't about being seen, it's about being recognized. It's about someone looking past what you've become and remembering what you were, what you are, what you could be again. Clint could have ignored the commotion that night. He could have let the staff remove the homeless man and return to his script. Nobody would have blamed him. It wasn't his problem. He had no obligation to get involved. Instead, he saw a Marine, and he refused to let that Marine be treated as less than he'd earned the right to be. The 40 diners who witnessed that night all left with a story they'd tell for years, but more importantly, they left with a question. How many people had they walked past, ignored, dismissed without ever seeing who they really were? How many Robert Chens had they treated as problems instead of people? How many veterans had they failed to recognize? That question changed some of them. A few started volunteering at veteran centers, others made donations to homeless services. Some simply started looking, really looking, at the people they passed on the street. Because once you've seen Clint Eastwood kneel beside a homeless Marine and treat him with dignity, you can never unsee it. You can never walk past another veteran without wondering, what's their story? What have they survived? What do they deserve that I'm not giving them? If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that every person you pass has a story, a history, a value that isn't diminished by their current circumstances. Have you ever looked past someone's appearance and seen their worth? Share your story in the comments. Ring that bell for more true stories about legends who understood that character is measured by how you treat those who can do nothing for you.